The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Catherine Hayworth stood at the window of her circulating library and watched the cathedral close turn to grey mist. The cobblestones shone like polished slate. Water dripped from the gargoyles jutting out from the cathedral walls, their stone faces weeping in silence. It was late afternoon, but felt like evening. The lamplighter had not yet come. She turned back to the empty room. 24 chairs, all vacant. The subscription fees for this quarter sat half-paid in a lacquered box on her desk, and the total was not enough to keep the doors open past midsummer. She had stopped pretending otherwise 3 weeks ago. The bell above the door chimed. A man stepped inside, shaking rain from a battered umbrella. He was tall but stooped, as though he had spent too many years leaning over desks. His spectacles were fogged with the damp. His coat was dark wool, good quality, but worn at the cuffs. He removed his hat and revealed hair the color of wet sand, untidy and curling at the collar. "Forgive me," he said. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Are you closing?" Catherine looked at the empty chairs, then back at him. "There is no crowd to turn away, so please." He nodded and moved toward the history shelves. She watched him without appearing to. A widow learns to observe without staring. She had been a widow for 4 years now. Her husband, the Reverend Martin Hayworth, had been a gentle man with a weak heart. He left her this library and very little else. The cathedral chapter tolerated her presence because Martin had been well loved. Tolerance, she had learned, was not the same as welcome. The stranger pulled a volume from the shelf and sat in the corner chair. He read with complete stillness, the way scholars read, the way men read when they have forgotten the world exists. His spectacles slid down his nose. He pushed them back without looking up. Catherine returned to her accounts. The numbers did not improve. He came again the next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that he never bought a subscription. He paid the penny fee for a day pass each time, placing the coin on the desk with careful precision. He always chose the same corner chair. He always read history. Cromwell, the Levellers. Paine, once, Catherine said, "You favor radical subjects." He looked up. His eyes behind the spectacles were not the pale grey she had assumed. They were hazel, green at the edges, brown near the pupil. "Favor honest ones," he said. She did not ask his name. He did not offer it. In the cathedral close, discretion was a form of currency. She understood this. Men came to her library to read things they would not read in public. Pamphlets, banned essays, the small, dangerous ideas that passed from hand to hand in the coffee houses beyond the close walls. She never asked what they were looking for. She simply kept the books where they could find them, but the quiet scholar was different. He never asked for anything. He simply read, and after the 3rd week, he began to nod when he entered. A small gesture. The smallest possible acknowledgement that they had seen each other before. She found herself waiting for that nod. It was the 2nd Tuesday of the month when she first heard the name Ashford spoken with venom. Lady Margaret Pemberton had come to return a novel, her silk gown rustling with indignation. Catherine did not care for Lady Margaret, who had once referred to her as the vicar's leftover, within earshot, but subscribers were subscribers. "Have you read the Duke of Ashford's latest speech in the Lords?" Lady Margaret demanded of no one in particular. "He means to restrict the press further. He called reform pamphlets a disease." A disease. Catherine's hand stilled on the ledger. The Duke of Ashford, the same, cold man, all logic and no heart. They say he has not smiled since his wife died, not that he smiled before. He wants to silence every voice that speaks against the government. This city would be his first target. Mark my words. Lady Margaret departed in a cloud of lavender and self-importance. Catherine stood at the desk and felt something tighten in her chest. The circulating library depended on the free exchange of ideas. If Ashford's measures passed, her shelves would be inspected, her books would be removed, her livelihood, fragile as it was, would vanish entirely. That afternoon the quiet scholar arrived at his usual hour. "You look troubled," he said. It was the first time he had initiated a conversation. Catherine was so surprised she answered honestly. "I am. I ask the cause." She hesitated. He was a stranger, a paying stranger in a shabby coat. But something in the way he waited, patient and unhurried, loosened her tongue. "Duke of Ashford," she said. "His speech in the Lords, do you know of it?" The scholar's expression did not change, but something moved behind his eyes, a flicker, a shadow, then it was gone. "I have heard of it," he said quietly. "He would destroy this place without knowing it exists," Catherine said. "He would silence ordinary people who only wish to read, to think, to speak. That is not governance. That is fear wearing a crown." She stopped. She had said too much. To a man she did not know, the scholar removed his spectacles. He polished them with a handkerchief. His hands, she noticed, were very steady. "You are right to be angry," he said. "You are right to speak. He put the spectacles back on. His gaze met hers. For a moment, the library felt very small. Just the two of them and the rain on the windows and the weight of words not yet spoken. Then he stood, placed his penny on the desk, and left. Catherine did not see him for 6 days. She told herself she was not counting the letter arrived on a grey morning. Catherine did not recognize the handwriting. It was small, precise, the letters formed with an almost mechanical care. The envelope contained no name, only a brief message written on plain paper. There is a pamphlet. It will be left inside the 3rd volume of Hume's history, near the east window after evening service. Read it, share it, or burn it. The choice is yours. She read the note 3 times. Her heart beat faster with each reading. She knew the risks. Distributing unlicensed pamphlets carried a penalty of transportation, or worse. But the circulating library had always been a place for dangerous ideas. Martin had believed that. Martin had said that the truth was never safe and never should be. She went to the cathedral that evening, not for the service, for the silence afterward. The pamphlet was there, folded, thin. She slipped it into her sleeve and walked home through the darkening close, her footsteps echoing on the stones. Behind her shutters, with a single candle burning, she read it. The pamphlet was titled On the Silence of Good Men. It was a condemnation of the very laws Ashford was championing, but it was not a crude attack. It was elegant, precise. It argued that men in power feared free speech because free speech revealed their failures. It called for reform, for accountability, for the right of ordinary people to read and write and think without the permission of their betters. The prose was cool, controlled, but beneath the surface, Catherine felt something burning, a rage that had been shaped into reason, a passion that had been disciplined into argument. She read it again, and again. She began leaving copies on the chairs of her library. Tucked into returned novels, slipped between the pages of the subscription ledgers, she never spoke of it, she never asked who wrote it. But the pamphlet began to circulate through the close like quiet fire. The scholar returned on the first Tuesday of the new month. He looked exhausted. His collar was limp. His eyes were shadowed with something that sleep could not fix. He paid his penny and moved toward the corner chair without speaking. Catherine watched him. She had grown accustomed to his presence. His stillness, the way he turned pages as though each one were fragile. She realized she knew nothing about him, not his name, not his home, not why he came here instead of the grander libraries in the cathedral precinct. She brought him a cup of tea. He looked up startled. "I did not order. It is not for sale," she said. "You look as though you need it." He took the cup. Their fingers did not touch, but something passed between them anyway. A warmth that had nothing to do with the steam rising from the tea. "You are kind," he said. "I am practical. Exhausted scholars do not pay their pennies. They fall asleep and I lose custom." He almost smiled. The expression was so brief she might have imagined it. "Do you always hide your generosity behind practicality? Do you always hide your identity behind a day pass?" The words came out before she could stop them. For a moment, the air in the library tightened. The scholar set down his cup. "Have my reasons," he said. "As do I." They looked at each other across the desk. The candle on her ledger flickered. Somewhere in the cathedral tower the hour bell began to strike. "I am not dangerous," he said. "I did not say you were." "You wondered." She did not deny it. He rose. He left his penny on the desk as always, but this time he paused at the door. "Pamphlet," he said, not turning around. "The one you have been distributing. You should be careful. There are men in this city who would see you punished for it." Catherine's blood went cold. "How do you know about that?" But the door had already closed, and he was gone into the rain. She did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed above the library and listened to the cathedral bells mark every hour. Someone knew, someone had seen, but the scholar had not threatened her. He had warned her. That was different. That was something else entirely. She thought about his hands, the steadiness of them, the careful way he moved, the exhaustion in his eyes. And she realized she was no longer simply curious about him. She was beginning to care. That realization frightened her more than the warning. The Duke of Ashford came to the cathedral city on a Thursday in early summer. Catherine learned of his arrival the way everyone in the close learned of such things. A ripple of movement. Carriages on the North Road. Servants hurried to prepare the bishop's guest house. Curtains twitching in the canon's residences. The air itself seemed to tighten with anticipation and resentment. She had never seen him. She had only heard the descriptions. Tall, imposing, a face like carved stone, eyes that revealed nothing, a widower who had buried his heart with his wife and never bothered to dig it up again, the most powerful voice in the Lords against reform, against the pamphlets, against everything Catherine's library quietly stood for. She spent the morning arranging her shelves and trying not to think about him. The scholar arrived at noon, which was unusual. His hours were predictable. Tuesdays, late afternoon, never noon, never Thursday. "You are early," she said. "I needed to see you." Words were simple, but his voice was different. There was an urgency beneath the calm. He removed his spectacles and polished them, a nervous habit she had come to recognize. His hands were not steady today. "Duke is in the city," he said. "There will be a public address this evening, in the cathedral. The canons have invited him to speak." "I know, you should not attend." Catherine set down the book she had been holding. "Are you telling me what to do?" "I am telling you what is safe. Safety is a luxury for women who have not already lost everything." He flinched. The movement was small, almost invisible, but she saw it. She had not meant to wound him, but she was tired of being afraid, tired of hiding. Tired of watching her library, her home, her purpose, slowly wither under the weight of men who had never once stepped through her door. The scholar took a breath. "I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But Ashford is not simply another politician. He is dangerous. He means to make an example of this city, of people like me, people who believe in something." She stared at him. The light from the window caught the edge of his jaw. There was a tension there, a restraint. As though he were holding back a flood. "Who are you?" she asked. "Really? I have let you sit in my library for months. I have brought you tea. I have trusted you with my opinions, which are not safe opinions to share, and I do not know your name." He was silent for a long moment. "John," he said finally. "John Clark." It was a lie. She knew it instantly, not from the name itself, which was perfectly ordinary, but from the way he said it, the hesitation, the slight shift in his gaze. A man telling the truth does not brace himself before speaking. She did not call him on it. She simply nodded. "Then, John Clark, I will decide for myself whether to attend the Duke's address." He left without another word. His tea sat untouched on the desk. Catherine went to the cathedral that evening. She stood at the back, among the merchants and the tradespeople and the servants. The front pews were filled with the canons and their wives, the bishop in his embroidered robes, the city's aldermen in their chains of office. The air smelled of incense and damp stone and whispered expectation. The Duke of Ashford entered through the north transept. He was tall, taller than she had imagined. His coat was dark blue, almost black, trimmed with silver. His hair was dark, cut close, threaded with grey at the temples. He moved with the economy of a man who had never needed to hurry. His face was composed, unreadable, cold, but as he turned toward the nave, something caught Catherine's attention. His hands, they were steady, utterly, perfectly steady. She had seen hands like that before. She told herself it was impossible. The scholar was stooped. The Duke stood straight. The scholar wore spectacles and a shabby coat. The Duke wore silver and authority. The scholar was John Clark, a shy academic who paid his penny and read radical histories in the corner chair, but his hands, she could not forget his hands. Catherine spent the next 3 days in a fog of doubt. She replayed every conversation with the scholar, every glance, every carefully chosen word. She remembered how he had warned her about Ashford, how he had said he is dangerous, how his voice had tightened when she spoke of the Duke's policies, a man condemning his own actions, or a man warning her about someone he knew intimately. The thought would not leave her. It followed her through the library, through her accounts, through the sleepless hours of the night. If the scholar and the Duke were the same man, then everything she had said to him had been said to her enemy. Every confession, every fear. Every defiant declaration. She felt sick. But if they were the same man, then the Duke of Ashford had spent months sitting in a struggling widow's library, reading banned books, paying his penny like any commoner, and he had written the pamphlet, the words she had distributed, the words she had believed in, the words that had set a quiet fire through the cathedral close, that made no sense, that contradicted everything she knew. On the 4th morning, a new pamphlet appeared inside the return novels. Catherine opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was the same, small, precise. The letters formed with mechanical care. The title read on the failures of power. She read the first paragraph. The man who holds power must first silence his own conscience. This is the bargain that corrupts absolutely. I have made this bargain. I have worn the mask of authority and felt it seal itself to my skin. I write these words not as a critic from a distance, but as a man who has seen the rot from within and can no longer pretend it is not there. Catherine lowered the pamphlet. Her hands were shaking. I have made this bargain. She read the words again and again. Each time they cut deeper. If this was the Duke's confession, then he was not her enemy. He was a man trapped inside a role he despised. A man who had found a way to speak the truth through anonymity. Through ink and paper and the quiet shelter of her library, but that meant he had lied to her. Every Tuesday, every conversation, Every gentle word over a cup of tea he had lied. She did not know which truth hurt more. The bell above the door chimed. Catherine looked up. The scholar stood in the doorway. No, the man she had called a scholar. His spectacles were in place. His coat was shabby. His posture was carefully stooped. But his eyes were the same eyes she had seen in the cathedral. Hazel, watchful. Holding back a flood. Hayworth, he said, may I come in? It is a public library, she said. Her voice was colder than she intended. You have paid your penny, you may do as you wish. He flinched, just as he had before. A small movement, barely visible. He did not go to the corner chair. He approached the desk. His gaze fell to the pamphlet in her hands. The pamphlet she had not hidden quickly enough. Something shifted in his face. You know, he said. It was not a question. Catherine could not breathe. The room felt too small, too quiet. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the window, catching the dust in the air, making it glitter like fragments of something shattered. Know your handwriting, she said. The pamphlets, the letters you leave with my returns, the notes you slip into Hume. I have read your words 100 times. I would recognize them anywhere. He removed his spectacles. Slowly, deliberately, he set them on the desk between them. My name is Alexander Charles Frederick Ashford, he said. I am the 9th Duke of Ashford, and I have been lying to you since the moment I walked through your door. She had thought the truth would bring clarity. It brought only pain. I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen as a man, not as a title, not as a political position, just a man who reads books and drinks tea and argues with a woman who is not afraid to tell him when he is wrong. His voice cracked on the last word. Catherine saw it then, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the careful performance of a man who had been performing for so long he had forgotten how to stop. You condemned my library, she said. Your speech in the Lords. I condemned myself. I wrote the words I was required to write. I stood before my peers and I said what was expected. And then I came here and I wrote the truth, because I could not breathe otherwise. Catherine looked at him. At the man behind the mask, the Duke who wrote radical pamphlets, the aristocrat who condemned his own class, the stranger who had become familiar, the liar who had told her the truth in the only way he could. If anyone discovers this, she said slowly, you will lose everything, your title, your position, perhaps your life. I know, you came here anyway. I came here because this is the only place I have ever felt honest. The words hung between them. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. The anger was still there, the betrayal, the confusion, but beneath it something else was stirring, something she had not felt in a very long time. She was no longer just a widow running a failing library. She was a woman holding the life of the most powerful man in the county in her hands, and she did not know what she would do with it. She did not speak to him for a week. He did not come to the library. She did not expect him to. The risk was too great now. She knew his face. She knew his secret. Every moment he spent in her presence was a moment someone might see, someone might wonder, someone might begin to piece together the truth. But she read his pamphlets, all of them. She gathered every one she had distributed, every one she had tucked between the pages of novels and left on windowsills and slipped into the hands of trusted friends. She spread them across her desk in the quiet hours after midnight and read them in order. The progression of his thought. The evolution of his conscience. The slow, painful confession of a man who had been born into power and had come to see it as a prison. I was taught that duty required silence. I have learned that silence requires complicity, and complicity requires the death of the soul. There is no reform without risk. There is no truth without consequence. I am prepared for both. If these words reach you, know that they were written in fear, not of discovery, but of inaction. Of becoming the very thing I once despised. Catherine traced his handwriting with her fingertip. The small, precise letters, the way the ink pressed into the paper as though each word had been carved rather than written. He was not a coward. Whatever else he was not a coward. On the 8th day, she went to the bishop's guest house. It was a foolish thing to do. She knew it even as her feet carried her across the cathedral close, past the watching windows, past the whispering matrons, past the canons' wives who had never quite accepted her presence among them. A vicar's widow did not call upon a duke. A woman alone did not present herself at the door of a powerful man without invitation. She did not care. The servant who answered looked at her as though she had arrived naked. The Duke of Ashford is not receiving visitors. Mrs. Hayworth is here. From the circulating library, the servant's expression flickered, disapproval, confusion, but he went. And when he returned, his face had changed entirely. He will see you in the morning room. Follow me. The morning room was flooded with light. Tall windows overlooked a walled garden where roses climbed trellises and bees moved lazily among the blooms. It was beautiful. It was private. It was everything her library was not. Ashford stood by the window. His back was to her. He was not wearing the stooped posture of the scholar. He was tall and straight and utterly still. "You should not have come," he said. His voice was different too, harder, more controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to command. "I had questions. Then. You ever intend to tell me the truth?" He turned. His face was composed, but his eyes were not. They were the same eyes she had seen across her desk 100 times, hazel, watchful, holding back a flood. "No," he said. "I intended to disappear, to stop coming to the library, to let you remember me as a nameless scholar who borrowed your books and troubled your peace. I never intended for you to know." "Then why did you write the pamphlets? Did you leave them where I would find them?" He was silent for a long moment. The bees hummed in the garden. The sun moved behind a cloud and the room dimmed. "Because I could not bear the thought of you believing in silence," he said. "You spoke to me once about the importance of ordinary people reading and thinking and speaking. You said truth was never safe and never should be. I have carried those words with me every day since." Catherine felt her throat tighten. She remembered that conversation. She remembered the rain on the windows and the emptiness of the library and the weight of her own anger. "I said those words to a stranger. You said them to me." She looked at him, the Duke and the scholar, the politician and the pamphleteer, the man who had lied to her and the man who had trusted her with his most dangerous truth. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing. I want nothing. I have already taken too much." "Then why am I here?" He crossed the room, not quickly. He moved with the same deliberate care he had always shown, as though every step required permission. He stopped an arm's length away. "You are here because you are the only person in this city who knows who I truly am, and you have not yet decided what to do with that knowledge. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not expect understanding. I expect only that you will do what your conscience demands." Catherine closed her eyes. The weight of it all settled on her shoulders, his life, his title. The pamphlets, the reform movement gathering quiet strength across the county, the library she was certain to lose if his laws passed, the man she had despised and the man she had begun to. She stopped the thought before it could complete itself. "If I tell anyone," she said, "you will be destroyed. If I say nothing, you will continue to pass laws that destroy people like me, while secretly writing words that could save us, and no one will ever know. That is monstrous. That is my life." She opened her eyes. He was watching her with an expression she could not name. Not hope, not fear, something in between. The look of a man who had laid down his armor and was waiting for the blow. She did not strike him. She turned and walked out of the morning room, through the silent corridors, past the staring servants, into the bright afternoon light of the cathedral close. Behind her in the garden, the bees continued their work. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Catherine's life. She continued to run the library. She continued to distribute the pamphlets. She continued to smile politely at the canons' wives and the cathedral deacons and the aldermen who passed her door without entering. Everything appeared exactly as it had before, and yet nothing was the same. Ashford remained in the city. His presence was a constant hum beneath the surface of every conversation. He attended services in the cathedral. He dined with the bishop. He made speeches about order and tradition and the dangers of reform. The same speeches she had heard about. The same cold, controlled rhetoric that made the merchants and tradespeople bristle with resentment. She watched him from a distance. The broad back, the erect posture, the face like carved stone. He was a different creature in public, remote, untouchable. The scholar who had sat in her corner chair and drunk her tea and spoken to her with quiet honesty had vanished entirely. But at night, new pamphlets appeared on her doorstep. She never saw him deliver them. She simply opened the door in the grey light of dawn and found them waiting. Folded, thin, the handwriting unchanged, the words growing bolder with every passing week. "I speak the language of power during the day. At night I write the language of truth. I do not know which man will survive this war within me, but I know which one I hope will win." She looks at me in the cathedral, and I see nothing in her eyes. This is my punishment, to be seen by her and yet invisible, to be known and yet unknown. I have loved words all my life. I did not know they could become a cage. Catherine read each one alone in her room above the library. She told herself she was gathering evidence. She told herself she was protecting herself against the day he might turn against her. She told herself many things, none of them were true. She was waiting. She did not know for what. The confrontation came on a Sunday afternoon. Catherine had closed the library early. The heat was oppressive. The cathedral bells had been ringing for hours, marking some feast day she had forgotten to observe. She was walking through the cloisters, seeking shade, when she rounded a corner and nearly collided with the Duke of Ashford. He was alone. No servants, no sycophants, just the man himself, his coat discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow. He was holding a book, her book. She recognized the worn leather cover. It was the volume of Hume she kept near the east window, the one where his pamphlets always appeared. He looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Your Grace," she said. The title felt wrong in her mouth, like a stone she had been forced to swallow. "Haworth." His voice was quiet. The public mask was gone. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her across the library desk, as though she were the only person in the world. "You should not be seen with me," she said. "I know. You are endangering yourself. I know. Then why are you here?" He closed the book. His hands, those steady hands, were trembling slightly. "Because I cannot stay away." Cloister was silent. The bells had stopped. The heat pressed down on them like a living weight. "I have done everything you asked," he said. "I have stayed away from your library. I have played my part in public. I have written my speeches and delivered my condemnations and smiled at the men who would destroy everything I believe in. But I cannot." He stopped. His voice broke. He took a breath. "I cannot stop thinking about you." Catherine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "You lied to me," she said. "Yes, you let me believe you were someone else. You let me despise you while you sat in my library and listened to me pour out my anger against everything you pretended to be." She stepped closer. She did not plan the movement. Her body simply carried her forward, drawn by something stronger than reason. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you keep coming back?" He looked at her. His eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "Because you were the first person in years who spoke to me as though I mattered. Not my title. Not my influence. Not my vote in the Lords. Me. The man who reads too much and speaks too little and has been alone for so long he has forgotten what it feels like to be known." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She understood loneliness. She had lived with it for 4 years. It was the empty chair at the dinner table, the cold side of the bed, the silence that followed the closing of the library door. She had wrapped herself in it like a shroud. He was offering her something different. She did not know if she was brave enough to take it. "Do not know who you are," she said. "The Duke or the scholar, the politician or the pamphleteer, I do not know which one is real." He said, "Both are real, both are me. I am a man divided against himself, and you are the only person who has ever seen both halves and not turned away." She reached out. Her fingers brushed his sleeve. The linen was damp with the heat. Beneath it she felt the warmth of his skin. "I have not turned away," she said. "Not yet." He closed his eyes. A single breath escaped him. It sounded like a prayer. The bishop's dinner party was the event of the summer season. Catherine had not been invited. A vicar's widow who ran a struggling circulating library did not receive invitations to dine with bishops and dukes. But Lady Margaret Pemberton, who had never forgiven Catherine for not properly deferring to her status, had taken it upon herself to ensure that Catherine knew exactly what she was missing. "Entire cathedral chapter will be there," Lady Margaret said, settling into the library's best chair as though it belonged to her. "And the Duke of Ashford, of course, such a commanding presence, so austere. I do wish he would smile more, but one cannot have everything." Catherine said nothing. She was sorting returns. Her hands were steady. Her expression was calm. Inside, she was screaming. She had not spoken to Ashford since the cloister. A week had passed. Then 2. The pamphlets had stopped appearing on her doorstep. The library had been empty of scholars and dukes alike. She had begun to wonder if she had imagined the entire thing. The confession, the trembling hands, the eyes bright with unshed tears, but Lady Margaret's words brought it all rushing back. "Have heard," Lady Margaret continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "that the Duke is considering a marriage. There is a young woman from a very prominent family, very wealthy, very suitable. Nothing announced yet, of course, but one hears things." Catherine's hands stopped moving. "A marriage," she repeated, to Lady Amelia Westbrook. "Her father is an earl, her dowry is obscene, and she is quite pretty in a pale sort of way. They say the Duke has been corresponding with her family for months." Months. Catherine felt something cold settle in her stomach. The scholar had been coming to her library for months, sitting in her corner chair, drinking her tea, speaking to her in that quiet, careful voice, all while corresponding with another woman, a suitable woman, a wealthy woman, a woman who could stand beside a duke without causing a scandal. Of course she was a fool. She had been a fool from the very beginning. Lady Margaret departed eventually, leaving behind a trail of perfume and satisfied malice. Catherine sat alone in the library and watched the sun sink behind the cathedral tower. The shadows lengthened. The room grew dark. She did not light a candle. She thought about everything she had said to him, everything she had revealed, the loneliness, the anger, the desperate hope. She had given him those pieces of herself without knowing who he truly was, and he had taken them, and he had given her pamphlets and confessions and trembling hands in return, but he had never promised her anything. He had never said he was free. The realization was a blade between her ribs. She had fallen in love with a man who did not exist, a composite, a fiction assembled from stolen hours and whispered truths. The real man was a duke who made speeches against everything she believed in, who dined with bishops, who corresponded with earls and their pale, pretty daughters, who had lied to her, who had warned her, who had trembled in the cloister and told her she was the only person who had ever seen both halves of him. She did not know what to believe anymore. That night a pamphlet appeared on her doorstep. She almost did not open it. She stood in the doorway, the paper thin and weightless in her hand, and considered throwing it into the street. Let the rain take it. Let the morning traffic grind it into the cobblestones. Let it vanish as everything else had vanished. But she was not a woman who turned away from the truth. Even when it hurt, she lit a candle. She unfolded the paper. They tell me I must marry. They have been telling me for years. My title requires an heir. My position requires a partner. My duty requires I set aside the foolish hope that I might choose for myself. But how can I choose another when my heart has already chosen you? I know I have no right to write these words. I know I have forfeited any claim to your trust. I have worn masks. I have spoken lies. I have stood before crowds and condemned the very ideas I believe in. I am a coward in 100 ways, but I am not a coward in this. I love you. I have loved you since you brought me tea and told me I looked exhausted. I have loved you since you stood in your empty library and declared that truth was never safe and never should be. I have loved you through every silence and every lie and every moment I could not speak the words aloud. If you tell me to go, I will go. If you tell me to burn these pamphlets and never write again, I will burn them. But I will not marry Lady Amelia Westbrook. I will not marry anyone who is not you. This is not a proposal. I have no right to propose anything. This is a confession, a final one, the truest words I have ever written. You hold my life in your hands. You have held it since the day we met. I am only asking you to hold it gently. Catherine read the letter 3 times, then she folded it carefully, tucked it into her sleeve, and walked out into the rain. She did not know where she was going until she arrived, the bishop's guest house. The windows were blazing with light. Carriages lined the street. She could hear music drifting through the open doors. Laughter, the clink of glasses. The bishop's dinner party was in full attendance. Catherine stood in the shadows across the street. The rain soaked through her shawl. She did not care. She was not invited. She would never be invited. She was a vicar's widow with a failing library and calloused hands and opinions that polite society found inconvenient. She did not belong in that room full of silk and candlelight, but he was in there, the duke, the scholar, the man who had written her a love letter in his careful, precise hand. She waited. She did not know what she was waiting for, and then the door opened, and a figure stepped out into the rain. He was not wearing a coat. His shirt was white, almost luminous in the darkness. He stood on the steps and looked up at the sky, letting the rain fall on his face. He looked exhausted. He looked alone. He looked exactly like the man who had walked into her library all those months ago, shaking rain from a battered umbrella. Catherine stepped out of the shadows. "Your Grace," she called. He turned. For a moment he did not recognize her, then his face changed. The mask fell away, and he was simply a man looking at her as though she were the answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. "You came," he said. "I received your letter." "I did not expect you to." "Neither did I." He descended the steps. The rain fell harder. Neither of them moved toward shelter. "I meant every word," he said. "If you ask me to leave this city and never return, I will do it. If you ask me to resign my title and live as a commoner, I will do that too. I have spent my entire life serving expectations I did not choose. I will not spend the rest of it serving them. Not when I know what I want." "What do you want?" He stepped closer. The rain was running down his face. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked nothing like a duke. He looked like a man who had been drowning and had finally found something solid to hold on to. "You," he said. "Only you, always you." Catherine felt the last of her resistance crumble. "I do not know how this works," she said. "I am a vicar's widow with a failing library and opinions that are not safe to speak in public. I do not belong in your world." "Then I will leave my world." "You cannot. You are a duke. You have responsibilities, people who depend on you. I have been 2 men for so long I have forgotten which one is real. But I know this. I know that when I am with you I am not performing. I am not pretending. I am simply myself, and I have not felt that since my wife died. I did not think I would ever feel it again." Catherine reached up and touched his face. His skin was cold from the rain. He closed his eyes at her touch, and a sound escaped him, something between a breath and a sob. "I am still angry with you," she said. "I know, you lied to me for months. I know, you let me fall in love with a stranger." His eyes opened. The hope in them was almost unbearable. "You love me. I love the scholar who sits in my corner chair and reads radical histories and drinks my tea. I love the man who writes pamphlets in the dark and leaves them on my doorstep. I love the man who trembles when he tells the truth. I do not know if I love the Duke, but I am willing to find out." He took her hand. His fingers were cold. His grip was firm. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, formal. And yet there was nothing formal about the way he looked at her. "I will spend the rest of my life proving myself to you," he said, "if you will let me." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. The rain was soaking through her dress. The music was still playing inside the guest house. Somewhere in the cathedral tower, the hour bell began to strike. She had spent 4 years alone. 4 years building walls around her heart. 4 years telling herself that love was something for other women, younger women. Wealthier women, women who had not already buried their futures, but the walls were gone now. He had dismantled them without ever meaning to, 1 penny at a time, 1 cup of tea, 1 trembling confession. "Yes," she said, "I will let you." Scandal broke in autumn. A servant had talked, or a letter had been intercepted, or perhaps the whispers had simply grown too loud to ignore. The Duke of Ashford, the coldest man in the Lords, the champion of order and tradition, had been seen emerging from a vicar's widow's circulating library in the early hours of the morning. He had been observed walking through the cloisters with her. He had been witnessed standing in the rain outside the bishop's own guest house, holding her hand, looking at her as though she were the only woman in the world. The newspapers printed what they dared. The pamphlets printed what the newspapers would not. The cathedral canons held emergency meetings. The bishop wrote a very stern letter that no one read beyond the first paragraph. Catherine lost subscribers. She gained others, the curious, the sympathetic, the scandal-hungry. Her library, which had been dying a quiet death, suddenly found itself at the center of the city's attention. She raised her subscription fees. She expanded her hours. She hired a young woman from the tradesmen's quarter to help with the accounts. She did not hide. She did not apologize. She walked through the cathedral close with her head held high, and when the canons' wives looked through her as though she were made of glass, she looked back at them as though they were made of dust. Ashford returned to London. There were speeches to give, legislation to block, political alliances to dismantle and rebuild. The work of reform was slow and grinding and frequently thankless, but the pamphlets continued. Now they bore a new signature at the bottom, not his name. He was not yet ready for that, but a symbol, a small, precise quill, the same quill she had seen him use in the corner chair of her library. They wrote to each other every day. His letters were long and careful, filled with news of Parliament and confessions of exhaustion and questions about her life. What was she reading? What was she thinking? Was the library warm enough? Had the roof been repaired? Did she miss him? She answered every question. Yes, no, the roof was holding. The new stove was adequate. She missed him so much it felt like a physical ache, a hollow space beneath her ribs that nothing could fill. In the spring he returned. The cathedral close was green with new leaves. The rain had softened to a gentle mist. Catherine was arranging a display in the front window when she heard the bell above the door chime. She did not turn around. Her heart was beating too fast. Her hands had gone still on the books. "Have you come to pay your penny?" she asked. "I have come to pay a much larger debt." She turned. He stood in the doorway. He was not wearing spectacles. He was not stooped. He was tall and straight and wearing a coat that fit him perfectly, dark blue with silver buttons. He looked like a duke, but his eyes were the same eyes she had always known. Hazel, watchful, holding back a flood. "The legislation has been withdrawn," he said. "The press restrictions, the library inspections, all of it. It will take months to make it official, but the votes are secured. Your library is safe." Catherine felt the tears rise before she could stop them. "You did that. I did what I should have done years ago. I stopped pretending I believed in things I do not believe in. I started speaking the truth in public instead of only in pamphlets. It has cost me allies. It has cost me influence. It may yet cost me my seat in the Lords. That what you want? It is what I am willing to lose." He stepped toward her. "I have spent my life protecting my position. I will not spend another day protecting it at the expense of my soul, or at the expense of you." She crossed the room. She did not run. A widow of 4 years does not run through her own library, but she walked quickly, and when she reached him she took his hands in hers and held on. "I was afraid you would not come back," she said. "I will always come back. This is the only place I have ever felt honest." Looked up at him. The light from the window caught the grey at his temples. There were new lines around his eyes. The work of reform was carving itself into his face. But he was smiling, a small smile, a real one. "Have a proposal," he said. "I thought you said you had no right to propose anything." "I have earned the right, I hope." She waited. "Marry me," he said. "Not in secret, not in shame. I want to marry you in the cathedral with the bishop himself presiding, whether he likes it or not. I want to walk through this close with you on my arm and dare anyone to say a word against you. I want to introduce you in London as the Duchess of Ashford and watch their faces when they realize you are the woman who wrote half my speeches and inspired the other half." Catherine laughed. The sound surprised her. She could not remember the last time she had laughed. "You want to cause a scandal. I want to cause a revolution, but I will settle for a scandal." She looked around the library, her library. The shelves Martin had built with his own hands. The chairs where scholars and tradesmen and curious young women sat and read and thought and became something more than they had been. This was her life, her work, her purpose, but it was not the whole of her life, not anymore. "Yes," she said, "I will marry you." He kissed her then, in full view of the window, in full view of the cathedral close and the canons' wives and anyone else who happened to be passing. It was not a modest kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had been silent for too long and had finally found his voice. When they parted, he was smiling. She was crying, neither of them cared. "Have something for you," he said. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "One last pamphlet, the last one I will ever write anonymously." Catherine unfolded it. His handwriting, small and precise, the letters formed with mechanical care, but the words were not political, they were not angry. They were not a condemnation of power or a call to reform. "To the woman who taught me that truth is never safe and never should be, to the woman who saw both halves of me and did not turn away, to the woman who will be my wife, my partner, and my conscience for all the days to come, this is not an ending. This is a beginning. Forever yours." She pressed the paper to her heart. Outside the window, the cathedral bells began to ring. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, painting the close in shades of gold and green. Somewhere a bird was singing. Somewhere a door was opening. And in the circulating library on the edge of the close, a widow and a duke stood holding each other, ready to begin the rest of their lives.